Hello, everyone. Today speaking to James Iandoli from Engaging the Phenomenon. He's going to introduce himself and then he will tell us what his encounters with UAP have been and the reason why he was invited to come talk to us today. Here you go, James. Please let everyone know who you are.
Sure, yeah. I'm James Iandoli. People will probably be familiar with me from creating Engaging the Phenomenon, which is a YouTube channel, podcast, and of course I'm on Twitter with everybody else on UFO Twitter. And I got involved in the UFO subject or UAP subject because I had encounters, and really for me it was they were life changing, and there was a series of encounters that I had that led me into CE5 and heist, human initiated contact experiences, or human initiated contact events. So I actually had experiences very early on in my life that those were, I didn't know, I didn't have any context for those experiences. So I was so young, but they were experiences with entities and they were really frightening. And I kind of just got through the experiences and went on with my life. I don't know if necessarily those were attached to the UFO phenomenon or the UAP phenomenon exactly, especially at that time. I mean, later now, in retrospect, I could see how it could be associated with it because of entities and telepathy. Um, but later on, when I was about 20 years old, I had a series of three experiences that were kind of part of one thing, which started with a very kind of like outrageous high strangeness that involved a very high level of synchronicities, leading to a daytime sighting of a fireball in the middle of broad daylight. Um, and I tried to chase the object. It eventually got out of my sight. And just a few months later, I ended up having something akin to a near-death experience. It's actually a trauma-induced out-of-body experience because I wasn't actually anywhere near death, but it was during this car accident, and that whole experience was life-changing within itself. But actually, that experience, I didn't realize this until really years later that I actually had thought about it, but that happened in the same exact location where I had seen the fireball to begin with, which happened a few months prior. And then after that trauma-induced out-of-body experience, which also had an entity that I came face-to-face with in this kind of simulation realm, if you want to call it that. I was not in my body at that point. Um, but the day after that whole experience, I had another experience where I was, you can call it a telepathic lock-on, where I was just in my house and I was directly told, it was more than a voice, it was a feeling, and it was like literally visceral in my body, told to come outside, and the whole thing happened. I ran outside and there's a physical, like, looks like a metal craft right above the trees, maybe 80 feet to 100 feet in the air. And with that telepathic lock on, I got all these impressions, and that whole event was like a 25-minute sighting in which my family was present to witness. There were two other family members who I called to come outside, make sure I didn't hit my head too hard the day before in that car accident. And sure enough, they saw everything that I saw. And after that, I was really on a mission because I had been interested for years, since my childhood in UFOs and metaphysics, because even when I was younger, I was having out of body experiences and what people can consider psychic phenomenon, just simple things. And so I was always open, had interest to those subjects. And these experiences I mean, they were life transforming because it was no longer like some kind of interest or something that was like fascinating to me. It became something of like a life mission, so to speak, because I was in it, and I had to, after having these experiences, I had to know like why. Everybody wants to know why me, why did this happen to me, how can this be possible? And during the whole 25-minute encounter thing, I'm thinking in my mind that the entire world knows this event is going on because there's crafts in the sky, and it's I figured everybody was seeing this for some reason. I thought disclosure was going to happen the next day. Apparently, it didn't, and I since at that point, I had read books and seen documentaries and shows and all that, but at this point, I really dedicated a lot of my time, all of my waking hours, to researching this. And through that, I found what people call close encounters of the fifth kind, or heist human initiated contact events. And what what really drew me to that was two things. Number one, I was like, wow, like why didn't I think of this? It's so obvious, right? Because when I had the contact, it is exactly how is described in the CE5 and heist literature. The the kind of mental aspect to it, the consciousness aspect to it, synchronicities and everything like that. And number two, because it was proactive. And actually during the contact experiences that I had, I got the impression or received the communication, however you want to interpret that, is that the entities that I had contact with, at least the impression that I got, was that they wanted people to know that they were here, right? But also this was a way for me to actively participate and have some level, of control, if you want to look at it that way, to these events, rather than these are just random events that are happening to me and I have no control over it. At least with something like CE5 or heist, I have some kind of participation in it. So that's kind of a brief summary of all that.
Thank you. I'm really impressed that you were able to summarize like your entire life of experiences that in that short amount of time. I appreciate that. Were there any physical effects for you after some of these contact experiences that you had?
So I as far as I can tell, there were physical effects during the actual events. Uh, you know, in like I could feel these sensations. So I mean, I can't measure that, right? But I can say that I felt it for sure and I observed it. Um, People can call it like a kundalini kind of thing, and I know that's not typically in the medical, you know, whatever. Yeah, I don't know what categorizations. Not in Western medicine, but in Eastern medicine, you'll find a lot of that actually. But so I experienced physical effects in that regard during contact experiences, where in some cases, I felt like electricity pulsing through my body, and what people call a kundalini experience is like energetic. Um, and cognitively, I guess you can say, the hearing and feeling of sensations and communication or impressions by the UAP phenomenon, um, as far as I can tell. Afterwards, I never got checked out because I don't want to go to any kind of I didn't want to go to anybody and talk about these experiences, because like the first thing I'm thinking is like these people are going to think I'm crazy and lock me up or try to give me some kind of medication, rather than take what I have to say literally, even if I had witnesses, to the events.
Did you ever consider? Well, let me ask you this first. Did you ever have any mental health consequences, like any symptoms that showed up because of these experiences?
Um, so for me, uh, not so much negatively. I mean, there's an aspect to it like, okay, there's different ways you have to consider this, right? So I did not want to talk about this publicly. So in a sense, I was kind of repressing kind of part of who I am, because now these I had these experiences. It's kind of a part of my, who I am now, in a sense. They don't define me necessarily, but yeah, it's a part of my experience that I can't really talk safely to anybody about it. So in that sense, I had to repress that kind of stuff and keep it to myself. So that, I mean, you can look at that as some kind of social effect, because that's the last thing there were. I spoke about it with my family members who were there, of course, and a few of my friends. But I didn't even really feel safe talking about it in the UFO community back then so much. Only to people I was very close with and doing field work with, who I felt safe sharing it with. But yeah, that's about it as far as that.
How did it go with family and friends? Were there any repercussions talking about it?
So my family witnessed um, the big event where there were the 25-minute event. So they took it as a matter of fact, because they saw that, and there was no question in their mind as to whether it was something anomalous or not. It was clearly not anything conventional. So not my family took it for what it was. My friends, you know, I had a friend who was even like an open-minded friend, and he was into meditation and metaphysics and all this, and I could see when I was like, trying to explain, I got closer to him, and we started talking about UFOs, and he was all about it, right? And then until I started to say, hey, I actually have had firsthand encounters with UFOs, and then it became a different story. That I can see him get a little uneasy, right? And I can see in his face, like he doesn't. I started to explain some of the experiences, and I could tell that he was like waiting for me to say like, oh no, I'm just kidding, or you know, he was like waiting for something. There was a cognitive dissonance like clearly going on, because he's my friend, he trusts me, and he's even open minded. But there was like a point where he's like, okay, hold on, like there's, it became too real at that point. Um, at but actually several years from that down the road, maybe 2 years down the road, he ended up having his own experiences by coming out and doing CE5 and heists with myself and a number of my friends, and bigger groups, consequently, in upstate New York. And I ended up seeing him have his own transformation, and saw where the cognitive dissonance was no more. But that during the time though, it was you could see um, it was almost stressful for him to hear what I had to say. Honestly, that's how it looked. And but I had other friends who were accepting of it, and there was other friends like I knew that I couldn't tell. Even if I knew them my whole life or for many years, I knew if I talked to them there, especially back then. We're in 2023 now. There's so much more going on. I'm talking back in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010. Those years, it was not really safe to talk about this publicly the way it is today. Thanks to everything that's been going on with from 2017 onwards.
Okay. If you had decided that repressing these issues was becoming difficult, and had wanted to seek help from somebody beyond your friend group or family group, what do you think would have been the best thing that someone providing help could have done for you?
I mean, what in an ideal world, or back then in reality, what's going to happen?
Well, in an ideal world where someone is listening to you talk about your experiences, what would you have wanted from that person in terms of help?
that's a really good question. See, I don't even know, because I don't even think we're there yet. And to say, like, when people have these experiences, this is the best way to help them, right? I think we need uh, more information and study on that, and I don't want to say experimentation, like you want to experiment on people, but we're behind the curve on that, right? There is no system and processes above board where this is how you help people. I mean, having someone that is going to listen to you and not judge you, or try to explain your experiences in a way that makes them feel comfortable, would certainly be helpful. I'm a meditation practitioner, and I was even before I had the experiences in 2007. Um, for me, that helped me, right? So if somebody may have had those experiences and they didn't have that background, maybe providing some of that philosophy and those kind of mindfulness based practices could be helpful. They helped me, certainly, uh, in my own experience, but I just so happen to have that background already. So I don't know if that was just good for me, or if that scales and say maybe that's a good idea for other people who are having these kind of experiences and weren't introduced to it already. I'm not sure. And that's why I think, probably studying this more and having more people communicate on it and compare is probably a good idea.
And I think you hinted at a big one. It sounds like overcoming the stigma would have been a big one.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, the stigma is, I mean, nowadays, again, it's different than it was even in 2007 and 2010. I mean, back then, I couldn't have imagined what we're seeing now publicly happen. It wasn't, it doesn't even seem like it was in the cards. That, not being judged and, stigmatized for something that you personally experienced is huge. I don't want to get too personal for some people, but in the same regard, it is personal to me. So that's like saying to somebody who experienced a racial incident at work, like, no, you didn't experience that. It doesn't exist. Like, excuse me? Or, the same with, somebody who's suffered physical abuse, telling them that it never happened. That's damaging to, someone's psyche, really. So that's kind of in part what, you're dealing with, for people over the decades who've had close encounters and experiences, and it was just like, no, that doesn't exist. And that's really, uh, again, repressive, and that doesn't help in the bigger conversation.
Well, since those things have happened, you've obviously come out and told everyone about different experiences that you've been a part of. You've been on this quest, this mission, as you said. Has it been helpful for you to just be out there and podcasting and talking about this with everyone?
For me, it has. For me, it has. I also, just in having the experiences, I felt kind of like a sense of obligation or duty to do it, because I think it's important that if it's something that's real, it should be discussed. And evidently, there's going to be other people that are in the same kind of scenario, and hiding it is not going to help anybody. For me, I came to the point where I was I didn't care anymore. Like, I just I was comfortable within myself that whatever happened happened, and I didn't really care what people think, to some extent. Maybe because I'm stubborn, but I think I'm better off now, having been open about it, than just trying to bury this, because there's a part of when you're burying it in yourself that's um, that's like like uh, when I'm out talking about it and I'm discussing it openly, it's kind of self-affirming in a way. And when I was hiding it more, it's like, I know that it happened, and again, I had witnesses to tons of different events, especially if you're considering CE5 and heist. But when you're hiding it like that, you never stop questioning yourself. I mean, I still to this day, I'll question myself and try to analyze and be analytical and self-observant, of what was actually genuine, 100% real, what's a belief, what's an impression, and I try to differentiate what's what to be accurate and as close to the truth as I can. But when you're repressing it, you're not. There's a part of yourself, at least for me, that was really like it made it almost not as real in a sense. It's really hard to explain, but when I was out opening it, I was just like, it was self-affirming, I guess I can say.
Yeah, it just occurred for me to ask, do you think if the government comes out and just says, yes, it is 100% real, this is definitely happening to people, that could cause an issue also?
Well, the reason it's going to cause an issue is because people have been lied to for so long. I think part of the biggest issue is not that for people to believe that extraterrestrial life or non-human intelligence, interdimensional, however you want to categorize, the intelligence behind the UFO phenomenon. I think what the biggest blow to people's psyche is that they have been lied to by their authorities and leaders for so many years. And again, it's not a monopoly or like a monolith, right? It wasn't like everybody knew and was hiding it. As far as the best that we can tell, there was a few people that kept it very guarded and had disinformation campaigns and everything else that led to where we are now. But the idea that there's life beyond Earth, I think most people, especially if it was handled back decades ago when it should have been addressed, is not surprising to many people. I think what is the hardest thing to come to terms with for people is that they've been duped, they've been tricked. Nobody wants to believe that they've been deceived, and especially by their authorities. So I think that's the biggest part. But I mean, it's too late, right? You have to either do it or not, and we're coming to the point now where it's coming out more and more, and it's obvious that it was covered up.
Yes, and I think that we would have been a little further along with helping people and not had to do this with people who are willing to be the brave people coming forward, talking about really personal events if the government had been honest all along. But I do appreciate that we can do this now.
Yeah, I mean, even David Grush in his interview with Ross Coulthart was talking about how you know people had been not only deceived but potentially harmed, and some people potentially even killed to protect the secret, and in the name of national security and whatever else, however you want to justify those kind of actions on the American citizens and even worldwide. So I think we would have been way further along, but at the same time, there's no sense kind of overthinking that now. What we should do is do the best we can do now.
Yeah. I'm happy to report that apparently within the last few years, everyone at Lockheed, for instance, changed. Like all of the leadership changed. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but it's interesting, right? So obviously the people who were keeping us from getting further along on the topic have been switched out to some degree. And here we are now trying to make some progress. Thank you again for coming and talking to us about this. Is there any final thing that you want to say to someone who is listening? They might be an experiencer, they might just be interested in the topic, they might be a medical or mental health professional. Is there any final thing that you might want to say to the audience?
Wow. I would say, trust yourself, take it seriously, but also, give yourself a chance to breathe and take it in. Don't rush anything. Give yourself time, and connect with other people who are on the same path and who seem to be on the right track. And yeah, be patient. Be patient with yourself, because you could have an experience and the whole kind of thing doesn't really unfold or have its effects sometime for weeks and months. And it's good to have something to ground you in your life. If you're an experiencer, like a hobby, or going to the gym or writing, or find something that's going to help you on a day-to-day basis and keep you grounded. And make sure that your relationships the relationships in your life in general are healthy. I would say that too.
Thank you. And if you would like, you can let people know how they can reach you.
Sure. Any social media that's out there, look for either James Iandoli or Engaging the Phenomenon. You'll find me there.
Thank you again for coming and talking to us, James, and for everyone listening. Thank you and take care. Bye, James.
Hey.